The restaurant looked like it had been designed to impress people who were already tired of being impressed. Floor-to-ceiling glass reflected the city lights, crystal fixtures floated overhead like frozen constellations, and every sound, laughter, footsteps, silverware, was softened into something expensive and controlled. At the center of it all sat a girl in a wheelchair. Her name was Lily Hale, and today she turned 12. The chair was sleek and custom-built, matte black with silver joints, the kind that told a story of wealth without saying a word. Her legs rested motionless beneath a pale blue dress, carefully chosen to match the ribbons on the cake placed directly in front of her. 3 perfect tiers. Vanilla frosting smoothed to flawless curves. Gold lettering spelling out her name as if it were a brand. Happy 12th birthday, Lily. The candles had already been lit once. They burned low now, thin wax trails dripping down their sides. No one had sung. No one had even suggested it. Lily's hands rested in her lap, fingers interlaced exactly the way her physical therapist had taught her, because keeping them still made adults more comfortable. She had learned that early. Still hands meant fewer stares. Still hands meant fewer awkward smiles. Her eyes, however, moved constantly. She watched the servers glide past her table without stopping, their eyes sliding away at the last second. She watched the men in tailored suits gather in tight circles, laughing just a little too loudly, their attention locked on her father rather than on her. She watched a woman she didn't recognize whisper something to another woman, both of them glancing over and then quickly looking away when Lily noticed. The empty chair beside her felt heavier with every passing minute. Her father, Richard Hale, stood near the bar, phone pressed to his ear even though the call had clearly ended minutes ago. He nodded, smiled, gestured, performing the role he had mastered better than any other. CEO. Visionary. Man who could command a room without raising his voice. Today, that room was supposed to be for his daughter. But something had gone wrong. Richard told himself he was just waiting for the right moment. Waiting for people to finish their conversations. Waiting for the investors from San Francisco to arrive. Waiting for the photographer to come back from the restroom. There was always something to wait for. There always had been. He glanced toward Lily, felt the familiar tightening in his chest, and turned away again. The cake stood untouched. Lily swallowed and adjusted her posture, her back pressing into the molded support. She told herself not to cry. Crying made people panic. Crying made them say things like, "She's so strong," and "She's such an inspiration," as if her existence were a lesson instead of a life. She didn't want to be strong today. She wanted someone to sit next to her. The doors to the restaurant opened with a soft whoosh, letting in a breath of cooler night air and the faint hum of traffic below. Lily noticed because she noticed everything. New sounds were a distraction from waiting. A man stepped inside, pausing just long enough to take in the room. He wasn't dressed like everyone else. His jacket was clean but clearly worn at the cuffs, the fabric softened by years of use. His jeans were dark, neatly pressed, practical. He carried himself with the quiet steadiness of someone used to standing alone. Beside him stood a boy, maybe 10 years old, holding a small gift bag with tissue paper poking out the top. The boy's sneakers squeaked slightly against the polished floor, and he immediately stilled, glancing up at his father, as if checking whether he'd done something wrong. The host was distracted, deep in conversation with a couple near the entrance, so they waited. The boy's eyes wandered the room, curious and unguarded. Then they stopped. He tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, not quietly enough. "Is that a birthday cake?" The man followed his gaze. He saw Lily. He saw the cake. The candles burned low. The empty chair. The way the girl sat perfectly still while the world flowed around her. Something shifted in his expression, not shock, not pity, but recognition. The kind that comes when you've seen loneliness before and know its shape. Lily noticed him looking. Her first instinct was to look away. Staring invited questions. Questions led to explanations. Explanations were exhausting. But he smiled. Not the tight, careful smile adults usually gave her. This one reached his eyes. It was warm. Unafraid. He took a step toward her table. Several people noticed at once. Heads turned. Conversation slowed. A server hesitated mid-stride. Richard glanced over, irritation already forming. He clocked the man's clothes, his skin, the way he didn't seem to belong, and felt his jaw tighten. Not now, he thought. Not today. The man approached Lily's table and crouched slightly so they were at eye level. He didn't touch her chair. Didn't assume anything. Hi, he said softly. I'm Marcus. Lily blinked, surprised by the sound of her own name not being used, not being announced or branded. Just a simple greeting. This is my son Eli, Marcus continued, gesturing behind him. Eli waved, shy but smiling. I like your cake, Eli said. It's really big. Lily felt a small, unexpected laugh escape her before she could stop it. It's supposed to be, she replied. Marcus noticed the unlit candles, the untouched plates. He noticed the absence more than the presence. He gestured to the empty chair beside her. Would it be okay if we joined you for a minute? The question hung in the air. Lily opened her mouth to answer, and froze. Her father was already moving toward them. Richard's smile was polite but tight, the kind reserved for unwanted interruptions. Excuse me, he said, placing himself slightly between Marcus and Lily. This is a private event. Marcus straightened slowly. He didn't bristle. He didn't back away. He simply met Richard's eyes. I understand, Marcus said. We don't mean to intrude. Eli shifted uncomfortably, clutching the gift bag closer to his chest. Marcus continued, voice steady. My son just noticed your daughter sitting alone. We thought we'd ask. Richard glanced at Lily, then at the surrounding guests who were now pretending very hard not to watch. Heat crept up his neck. There's no need, Richard said. She's fine. Lily's fingers tightened in her lap. Marcus's eyes flicked to her hands, then back to Richard. Is she? The question wasn't confrontational. It wasn't loud. That made it worse. Richard exhaled sharply. Sir, please step away from the table. Eli looked up at Lily again. It's your birthday, right? He asked. She nodded. Happy birthday, Eli said simply. Those two words hit her harder than she expected. Marcus glanced between Lily and her father. He could feel the weight of the room pressing in, the unspoken rules, the lines he wasn't supposed to cross. He crossed them anyway. He pulled out the chair. Lily's breath caught. Marcus looked at her, not at Richard. Is it okay if I sit? She hesitated, her eyes darting to her father's face, searching for permission she didn't need but had learned to wait for. Richard opened his mouth. Before he could speak, Lily nodded. Yes, she said. The chair scraped softly against the marble floor as Marcus pulled it back. The sound cut through the room sharper than any raised voice. Conversation stalled. Laughter thinned into something brittle and uncertain. Every person nearby pretended not to stare while doing exactly that. Richard Hale's jaw tightened. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the eyes on him, the investors, the board members, the people who followed his lead because he had taught them how. This was not how the evening was supposed to unfold. This was not part of the plan. Sir, he said again, lower this time, warning threaded through the word. I'm asking you to leave. Marcus didn't sit yet. He rested one hand on the back of the chair and looked at Richard calmly. I hear you. But your daughter said it was okay. The room seemed to lean toward them. Lily felt her pulse racing, her chest tight with something that was half fear and half relief. No one ever chose her answer over her father's authority. No one ever stayed once Richard stepped in. The fact that Marcus was still there made her feel both exposed and strangely protected. A server appeared at Richard's elbow, her expression apologetic and tense. Mr. Hale, should I call? Richard shook his head sharply. Not yet. His eyes flicked to Marcus again. This is not appropriate. Marcus nodded once, as if acknowledging a business point. Maybe not. But neither is leaving a kid alone on her birthday. That did it. A ripple of discomfort passed through the guests. Someone near the bar shifted their drink to the other hand. A woman in a silk dress whispered, "Oh my God!" under her breath. Phones hovered undecided, then slipped back into pockets. Richard felt the control he valued so deeply starting to slip. "You don't know anything about this," he said, voice tight. "You're making assumptions." Marcus finally sat down. The chair legs clicked softly against the floor. He positioned himself beside Lily, close enough to matter but not crowding her space. He placed his hands on the table, palms down, open. "I know what it looks like," Marcus replied. "And I know what it feels like." Richard let out a short laugh, sharp and humorless. "You have no idea." Lily's eyes moved between them. She felt like a line drawn in the middle of a tug-of-war she hadn't asked for. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to say something that would make it stop, but words felt heavy and unreliable. Eli stood beside Marcus's chair, small and unsure. He looked around at the towering adults, the stiff suits, the polished shoes. He felt very out of place. "Dad," he whispered, tugging Marcus's sleeve. "Are we in trouble?" Marcus glanced at him and smiled gently. "Not if we stay kind." Richard noticed the exchange. Something about it irritated him more than he wanted to admit. The ease. The quiet confidence. The way the man didn't seem intimidated by the room or by him. "Security," Richard said, raising his hand slightly. This time, a tall man in a dark suit began moving toward the table. Lily's breath caught. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress. "Wait," she said, her voice small but clear. The security guard slowed. Richard looked at her, surprised. "Lily, I'm not done," she said, forcing the words out before fear could swallow them. "I want them here." The room went completely still. Richard stared at his daughter, seeing her not as an extension of his life but as a presence pushing back against it. He searched her face for uncertainty, for hesitation. There was none. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said softly, not realizing the weight of the words until they had already landed. Lily flinched. Marcus's posture changed instantly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand. But something in him hardened, like steel settling into place. "She's not the one being embarrassed," Marcus said quietly. Richard's face flushed. "This is none of your business." Marcus met his gaze without blinking. "The moment a child is left alone in a room full of adults, it becomes everyone's business." A murmur spread through the crowd. Not agreement exactly, but discomfort. Reflection. One of Richard's colleagues cleared his throat. "Richard, maybe we should just sit for a moment." Richard shot him a look that could freeze glass. "This is a distraction," Richard snapped. "This night is important." Lily swallowed hard. "It was supposed to be," she said. The words barely carried, but they landed anyway. Marcus turned slightly toward her. "Do you want to tell me about your cake?" he asked, gently shifting the focus back to her, giving her space to breathe. She hesitated, then nodded. "It's vanilla. I asked for strawberry, but vanilla is easier." "For who?" Marcus asked. She shrugged. "For everyone." That answer hurt more than anything else. Marcus smiled sadly. "Vanilla's still good. But strawberry would have been braver." Eli grinned. "Strawberry's the best." Lily felt something loosen in her chest. A tiny, fragile relief. Richard watched the interaction, his irritation now tangled with something else, guilt, maybe, or fear. This man was connecting with his daughter in a way he hadn't managed to all evening. Maybe longer. "You're overstepping," Richard said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Marcus looked up at him. "I'm stepping in." The security guard hovered awkwardly, unsure of whose authority to follow now. A woman near the table spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Richard, maybe let them stay. Just for the cake." Several heads nodded. Others looked away, unwilling to align themselves but equally unwilling to intervene further. Richard felt trapped. Every option felt like a loss. If he forced them out, he would look cruel. If he let them stay, he would lose control. He glanced at Lily again. She was smiling. Not the polite smile she used for cameras. A real one. Something in his chest cracked. "Fine," he said sharply. 5 minutes. Marcus inclined his head. "Thank you." Eli exhaled in relief and set the gift bag on the table. "We brought you something," he said to Lily, pushing it toward her. She looked at Marcus, unsure. "It's okay," Marcus said. "No strings." Lily opened the bag carefully. Inside was a small music box, its paint chipped at the corners, clearly loved. She wound the key slowly. A soft, familiar melody filled the air. The sound changed the room. People stopped whispering. A server paused mid-step. The tension eased, just slightly, like a held breath finally released. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over her. Richard watched her, really watched her, and felt the weight of everything he hadn't done pressing down on him all at once. The 5 minutes hadn't even started counting yet. And already, the night was slipping out of his control. The melody faded slowly, the final note hanging in the air longer than anyone expected. It was not loud, not dramatic, but it did something the room hadn't managed all evening. It made people stop pretending. Lily opened her eyes. For the first time that night, she wasn't looking at the cake, or the candles, or the empty space beside her. She was looking at Marcus. "That song," she said quietly. "My mom used to play it." The words dropped like glass. Richard stiffened. He hadn't expected her to say that. He hadn't expected her to say anything at all. Marcus didn't react right away. He let the silence breathe. "Yeah?" he said softly. "My mother used to hum it while she cooked. Burned almost everything, but she always hummed like she knew what she was doing." Lily smiled. "My mom couldn't cook either." Eli laughed. "Dad still can't." Marcus chuckled, then grew thoughtful. "Music sticks around even when people don't," he said. "It remembers things for us." Richard felt something twist sharply in his chest. He hadn't heard his late wife's name spoken out loud in months. The house was full of her things, yet empty of her presence. He had buried himself in work, convinced that motion was the same as healing. Watching his daughter connect with a stranger over a memory he'd avoided felt like being exposed. "You shouldn't assume things," Richard said suddenly, too sharply. Marcus looked up. "I didn't." "You're drawing conclusions," Richard insisted. "You don't know our situation." Marcus nodded. "That's true. I don't. But I know grief. And I know what happens when it sits unspoken in a room." Lily glanced at her father. "Dad, it's okay." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were pleading. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. The words wouldn't line up the way they always did in boardrooms. A server approached cautiously, holding a lighter. "Would you like me to relight the candles?" she asked Lily, not Richard. Lily nodded eagerly. "Yes, please." As the flames flickered back to life, Marcus noticed something else no one had bothered to address all night. The cake was positioned too far forward on the table. Lily couldn't reach it without leaning awkwardly, straining against her support. He stood and gently slid the cake closer, aligning it so she could reach it easily. The movement was smooth, instinctive. Richard noticed. "You know how to do that," he said before he could stop himself. Marcus glanced up. "Do what?" "Adjust the table. The spacing. The angle," Richard said. "Most people don't even think about it." Marcus paused. "My wife used a chair too." The words landed with quiet force. Lily looked up sharply. "She did?" Marcus nodded. "Car accident. Same year Eli was born." Eli's smile faded slightly. He stared at the music box. Richard felt the ground shift beneath him. "What happened?" Lily asked carefully. Marcus took a breath. "She passed away 3 years ago." The room seemed to soften around them, as if the walls themselves were listening. "I'm sorry," Lily said. "Me too," Marcus replied. "But she taught me a lot. Like how not to hover. How to help without making it obvious. How to let someone be themselves without turning them into a project." Richard felt heat rise behind his eyes. He turned away quickly, pretending to check his phone. Lily studied Marcus for a long moment. "My dad, he tries," she said. "He just gets scared." Richard flinched. Marcus didn't look at him. "Fear makes people disappear even when they're standing right in front of you," he said. A long silence followed. Then Lily reached for the knife. Her hand trembled. The knife was heavier than it looked, and the angle wasn't right. She struggled, frustration flashing across her face. Instinctively, Richard stepped forward. "Let me." Lily shook her head. "I can do it." Marcus watched carefully. He didn't intervene. He waited. After a few seconds, Lily's grip slipped. The knife clattered against the plate, frosting smearing unevenly. Her shoulders tensed. Marcus spoke gently. "Can I show you a trick?" She hesitated, then nodded. He positioned himself beside her, careful not to crowd her space. "Angle the blade like this," he said, demonstrating slowly, letting her mirror the movement. "And don't push down. Let the weight do the work." Lily tried again. This time, the knife sliced cleanly through the cake. A small gasp rippled through the nearby guests. Someone clapped softly, then stopped, unsure if it was appropriate. Lily beamed. "I did it," she said, disbelief and pride tangled together. Marcus smiled. "Told you." Richard felt something break inside him. Not loudly. Quietly. Like ice cracking under pressure. "You didn't rush her," he said hoarsely. Marcus looked at him. "She didn't need rushing." Richard swallowed hard. "I've spent years trying to make things easier for her." "And did you ask her if she wanted that?" Marcus asked. The question wasn't cruel. It wasn't accusatory. It was honest. Richard looked at Lily, really looked at her. Not the chair. Not the medical equipment. Her face. Her expression. The spark he hadn't noticed in too long. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. Lily took a breath. "I want you to sit with me." The request was simple. Devastating. Richard hesitated only a second before pulling out the empty chair on the other side of the table. He sat down. For the first time that night, he was eye level with his daughter. "I'm sorry," he said, voice barely steady. I thought keeping things perfect would protect you." Lily reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I don't need perfect. I need you." Tears slipped down Richard's face. He didn't wipe them away. The guests nearby pretended not to see. No one checked their phones. No one whispered. Marcus stepped back slightly, giving them space. He nodded to Eli, who leaned against his side. The security guard quietly moved away. Richard looked up at Marcus, eyes red, voice thick. "You didn't have to do any of this." Marcus shrugged gently. "Someone once did it for me." Richard stood slowly and extended his hand. "Thank you." Marcus shook it. Firm. Respectful. Equal. The candles burned steadily now. The night had reached a point of no return. And whatever came next, it would not be about image, or control, or silence anymore. The candles burned lower again, wax pooling at their bases, but no one rushed to relight them this time. The moment no longer needed ceremony. It had weight all on its own. Richard stayed seated beside his daughter, his hands still resting over hers, as if letting go might undo what had just happened. The room around them had changed. Not visually, glass still gleamed, suits still fit perfectly, but the tension that once ruled it had dissolved into something quieter and truer. A server approached cautiously with plates. "Would you like me to serve the cake now?" she asked Lily directly. Lily nodded. "Yes. Please." Richard watched as the first slice was placed carefully in front of her, positioned so she could reach it easily. He noticed details now. Things he had missed before. The way the table height mattered. The way people waited instead of rushing. The way Lily's shoulders relaxed when no one hovered. She took a bite and smiled. "It's better when you wait," she said thoughtfully. Richard laughed softly through lingering tears. "You always were smarter than me." She tilted her head. "You just didn't listen." He nodded. "I'm listening now." Across the table, Marcus stood quietly, content to fade into the background now that the center of gravity had shifted. Eli leaned against him, his earlier nervousness replaced with curiosity, as he watched the room come back to life in a new way. People began pulling chairs closer. Someone refilled glasses. Laughter returned, but it was different, less performative, more human. Conversation softened. The room had learned something, though no one would have been able to name it out loud. Richard rose slowly and tapped his glass, the soft chime drawing attention without demanding it. He hesitated, then spoke without the polished cadence he usually relied on. "I had a speech planned tonight," he said. "About growth. Vision. The future." A few people smiled politely. "But I think my daughter gave the only speech that mattered." He looked at Lily. "Thank you for reminding me what success actually looks like." Applause followed, hesitant at first, then sincere. Lily blushed, ducking her head. Richard turned toward Marcus. "And thank you," he added, "for stepping in when I didn't." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't come here to teach anyone a lesson." Richard shook his head. "That's what makes it matter." For a moment, the two men simply looked at each other. Different lives, different paths, intersecting briefly but indelibly. Later, as plates were cleared and the evening began its gentle descent toward an ending, Lily waved Marcus closer. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Do you ever get tired?" she asked. "Of being strong all the time?" Marcus considered the question. "Yeah," he said honestly. "But I've learned something. Being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means knowing when to sit down and let someone else share the table." She nodded, absorbing that. "I like that." Eli stepped forward, holding the music box. "You can keep it," he said shyly. Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "My mom would want you to have it." She held it like something fragile and priceless. "I'll take really good care of it." "I know," Eli said. Richard watched the exchange, something settling in his chest, a quiet resolve he hadn't felt in years. When the night finally began to wind down, coats were retrieved, goodbyes exchanged. The guests left in ones and twos, their conversations hushed, thoughtful. Something about the evening had followed them, clinging gently. At the entrance, Richard stopped Marcus one last time. "If you're ever willing," he said, choosing his words carefully, "I'd like to stay in touch." Marcus nodded. "That'd be good." They shook hands again, not as strangers this time, but as men who had seen each other clearly. As Marcus and Eli stepped out into the cool night air, Lily called out from her chair, her voice bright and certain. "Marcus?" He turned. "Next year," she said. "I want strawberry cake." He smiled. "Deal." The doors closed behind them, and the hum of the city swallowed their footsteps. Inside, Richard returned to his daughter's side, crouching so they were eye level again. "I miss too much," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You found your way back." He kissed her forehead gently. "I won't leave again." She believed him. The candles were finally blown out, smoke curling upward in thin, lazy spirals. Wishes were made, not silently, but aloud, messy, honest, hopeful. And in a room built for power, prestige, and appearances, the most important thing that happened that night wasn't the cake, or the guests, or even the apology. It was a chair being pulled out. And someone choosing to sit.